All right, Kelly, welcome to the WealthTech podcast. I am excited to have you on the show. I think this is going to be a fascinating discussion. Kelly is Director of AI Business Enablement at Crescent, which I really think is a fascinating role, and I'm looking forward to digging into how firms can adopt AI in a practical and safe manner. Kelly, would you mind kind of giving a brief introduction of yourself and your role at Crescent?
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for having me on the podcast. Like you said, I'm the Director of AI Business Enablement here at Cresset, and I really focus on our internal AI efforts, which I think of in kind of three categories. One, looking at our foundational technical and policy strategy, another, looking at adoption and training, and then the third being thinking more specifically about where we want to invest in particular AI solutions. And prior to Cresset, I did a PhD in computer science at the University of Chicago, where I focused on AI and particularly human AI interaction. I also did research at MIT and I worked at Microsoft building enterprise products. So I am new to the wealth tech space, but very excited to be here.
Well, you may be new to the wealth tech space, but obviously you're not new to AI. And I think that being able to bring that perspective into the industry is great. Why did Crescent create this role? What is the vision and purpose behind the role at Crescent?
So Cresset decided that they wanted to bring AI expertise in-house, which I think makes a lot of sense. They want to be looking at how do we set AI vision? How do we develop our strategy? I think right now AI is moving so quickly and there's frankly a lot of hype. I'm really looking forward to helping us navigate, what matters and how do we drive really practical impact.
That makes sense. There is a lot of hype around AI, and then, how to get results from AI that are meaningful, I think is important. First off, let's talk about how to adopt AI safely and securely. What should firms think about when it comes to adoption? What sort of guardrails and policies should they have in place with their employees corporate wide to be able to ensure that their client information remains private, that information is not inadvertently leaking out, that there is kind of a stated and known way in which people can use AI, so there isn't like a shadow docket that's getting created with AI. But how can firms balance the ability for kind of employees to be able to experiment with AI, to be able to leverage the capabilities of it, yet do it in a way that adheres to the needs of compliance of the industry as well as the needs of the firm and the clients?
So I think something you mentioned is actually the first most important thing, which is that it's important to give employees access to AI tools because there is this risk that if you don't provide people with best-in-class tools, they will likely try to use these shadow tools on the side. And that's actually a huge risk to having data accidentally leak out. So we provide everyone with things like ChatGPT, and then I think part two, to your point, is it's important to do that along with a really robust policy and training program. So we have an AI policy that covers what you can do, what you can't do. And the thing that really reinforces is that it's important to have a human in the loop at this stage. Nothing that AI produces should be just sent out without having someone very closely look over it, and that AI should really be used as a support tool. So it's not here to do your job, it's here to help provide you inputs for you to do your job. That is kind of the policy side. And then on the training side, I think really helping people to understand, how they can leverage it best, what it is actually useful for, and doing all of this on tools that we have vetted and that we feel good about the contracts and that we are sure that the data is really safe.
That makes sense. What would you say to the 50% of advisors that have not adopted AI? Um, in terms of your advice and where they should be at in their journey?
I think that it's pretty easy to just start experimenting, even if you're not using the outputs. And so I think that even if you're not sure this is something you want to build into your workflow, go out, try it with ChatGPT, try to have it help you write an email. Just start playing with it because I think that it's kind of a new way of interacting with technology. It's a new way of working. And as Ethan Mollick, who's a professor, likes to say, this is the worst AI you'll ever use. And so it is going to keep getting better. And I think it's best to try to get on the learning curve now.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. It does seem to be getting better and getting better rapidly. I think in terms of and it's also from a user standpoint too, that the more you interact with AI, the better results that you can get because you understand like how to craft that prompt better.
So some of the things we do internally to try to get people comfortable with it is I release a prompt every week that's really targeted at something an advisor might find useful. We also run training programs where we explain, there's the interactive part of something like ChatGPT, but there's also ways to connect it to tools and other information. And I think a lot of it is not intuitive. And so there's great YouTube videos, OpenAI releases, resources. It's worth kind of looking at some of these resources so you are getting past just the initial most obvious way to use it. And then we're really encouraging people to share ideas that they come up with. This happens to me as I'll hear a way somebody's used it, and I'll go, wow, it seems obvious now, but why didn't I think of that? So we have mechanisms for just anybody at Cresset who has a great idea or wants to share a prompt to do that so that we can all learn from each other.
Love it. Prompt of the week. That's great. What are some use cases where AI can really uh, deliver value? And talk to me a little bit about how you got to do that identification and prioritization of that.
Yeah, I think that that really starts with looking both at what are the high level business goals and the things we're trying to achieve, and then also looking very closely at what are people's workflows like and where might AI be able to unlock some sort of advantage that, lets people refocus on the types of work they want to do and takes over some of the grunt work. But really, I think it's important to start with those pain points and then try to figure out what is the best solution. So there's some generic things like note taking has been really valuable. Document extraction is better than it used to be. Ways that people can ask questions about things like HR documents that it used to be you had to go search for the information in a file somewhere or bug a colleague. And now, you can ask questions in pretty natural language and get a good response. So these are kind of the first sets of things we're looking at as we explore more closely, what different workflows can really benefit.
Talk to me about note taking. Has Crescent adopted a client note taking tool? And if so, like what has the results been with that?
Anything that we do, we want to make sure it ultimately is going to benefit the advisor and benefit the client. So this is a case where I think in some cases it lets us understand the full scope of what happened in a meeting, and then the advisor can make sure that they're staying on top of that, addressing it, and are able to look at it for the next meeting. And of course, people were taking notes before, but I think that this lets the person really engage in the human part of the interaction without having to worry about, did they catch everything? Of course, this is something we are building a specific policy around, though, because there are times where you may not want to be recording and you want to be very sensitive to client preferences. So I think, yes, it's definitely something we're exploring, but in the way that we're doing everything with AI, we're making sure we're pairing it with training and the appropriate policy support.
Yeah, I think the ability to have a AI note taking tool allows the advisor to be more present, right? Or you don't need as the three or four people that you might have need in the meeting before because you had to have somebody taking notes. That the advisor can really just focus on the conversation, knowing that the follow-up items will be captured. Also, I think some of it with the integrations into the CRM and the ability to have that kind of follow-up items kind of mined from that conversation could be incredibly powerful. I think we're seeing some studies out there that are showing it's saving 3 to 4 hours a week of advisors' time, which is a lot, right? You compound that by the number of advisors you have, you compound that by the number of months. That's a pretty significant ROI. Are you seeing any other kind of high impact ROI use cases that where AI can play a significant role?
I think that the document extraction one is also really valuable. You know, we a lot of data gets stored in documents, and being able to pull that data out and reorganize it and make sure it's stored somewhere that is easily searchable and that can be fed to other kinds of AI to be able to be searched is another one that especially generative AI has been making a lot better.
There is a lot of in the wealth management industry, there is a lot of information that's tied up in documents, right? Trust, estate documents, legal documents, alternative investments. Like it's just chock full of it's a it's the land of PDFs there. And AI does seem to be able to be really good at being able to extract that information consistently, accurately. How does Cresset go about creating an AI roadmap? What is the mechanism that you guys have put in place to be able to identify the initiatives that you want to take on and be able to prioritize those?
I think back to the combination of a bottom-up approach and a top-down approach. We want to make sure, excuse me, we're building the roadmap based on the long-term vision, but then we're also going out to people across the organization. We have an AI champions program. We've got representation across the organization to help us surface what are the really high value use cases. And I would say we're really focused on the advisory space right now, but I think there's also a lot of opportunities across all areas of the business. Because it changes so quickly, I think the important thing with the roadmap here is it has to be iterative and frequently updated. So if there are things we could be delivering as we go, I think the best approach is release something that works today, make sure we can iterate on it tomorrow as better things come out, make sure that that's flexible. And it's a learning process for everyone because, there might be a tool next week or OpenAI might release something next week that we didn't have last week, and that could unlock a whole new capability.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think an iterative approach is always a good approach. I also think a roadmap needs to be a living, breathing document. It's not something that's set in stone, right? New information comes up. I think there certainly needs to be room in roadmaps for, yeah, not only did we do this initiative, but there's going to be follow-up on that initiative. We're going to need to tweak it. We're going to need to refine it. You're going to need to really kind of optimize it versus just kind of automatically moving on to the next thing. There needs to be some sort of reserve put in place there. I think your change management approach to the bottom up and top down approach makes a lot of sense, whether it's AI or any other type of technology initiative. It seems like the struggle not so much with the technology is the change management process, the human process of that. Talk to me a little bit about Crescent's change management process and how you're getting adoption and buy-in.
I've been really thrilled that pretty much everyone I've talked to has been very excited about AI. So that's a nice starting point. And I think people are just really excited to learn. So I think what we're trying to do is meet that demand for learning and curiosity that's coming from folks with things like training, support, outlets for sharing ideas. It's really a strategy built around saying we've got, great people and they're already doing great things, and we want to empower those people to help us figure out what we can be doing better because they're the experts in their workflows. And so, yeah, things like the AI Champions program, ways for sharing ideas. When people do something great, we really try to celebrate it and make sure we're giving those people credit. So at our recent meeting, we shared a couple of GPTs that folks had made that were really cool, and it showed other people that they could also go make these things. So it's been really fun, actually, being in an environment where everyone's excited to be building things.
I love it. I love the fact that you're celebrating your successes and highlighting uh, some of those kind of team member contributions. Human-centric design, obviously, when you were talking about your background, it's a key part of it. Maybe folks might not be as familiar with what is human-centric design, but talk to me about human-centric design and how does that guide your approach to development and implementation of AI?
So human-centered design really says it sounds kind of obvious when you say it, but you start with the human and then the technology follows. But I think it's easy to get into the trap of, wow, there's this really cool new technology, and then you've kind of got a hammer and you go looking for nails. This is saying it's important to figure out what the nails are first and then select the appropriate hammer. And I think that that is really important to my philosophy for how I approach AI at Cresset in terms of thinking about what is it that people need? What are the workflows that people want help with? What is it that people, what parts of people's jobs do they wish that they could automate? And then say, okay, given that, what is the best solution? I'm not coming in saying we must adopt AI because it's cool and new and shiny. It's really
Yeah,
trying to change how people work for the better.
technology for technology's sake, but focusing on problems people have, right? And try
Exactly.
to.
And in research, there's kind of ways that we've developed to go about that, whether that's going out and interviewing people or doing surveys or making sure we engage. So I spend a lot of time talking to people and making sure I do really understand where folks are and where they're coming from and what they're looking for.
Love it. Talk to me about AI and data, the relationship between the two. What do firms need to do from a data governance standpoint to make sure that they're getting good results from their AI initiatives?
So I think AI and data are kind of like two sides of the same coin. Data is really critical to having AI that works well. In the machine learning era, data was used as a predictive mechanism, and I think there are still cases where machine learning can be valuable. In a generative AI paradigm, I would say you think of the word context. So you have to provide a generative AI agent the right context to be able to help you answer whatever question you're looking for. And so as I think about how we want to organize our data, I think, what are the types of questions people are asking and how do you make sure you have all that context in one place so that something like an AI assistant can go out and retrieve that information. So if, for example, if you're thinking, provide me, the note taking was an example of like, tell me about the last meeting, what did we talk about? You have to make sure that that context is somewhere that's accessible. And I think a strong approach to data governance is really important. We actually have a really fantastic data governance head of data governance at Cresset who's working on making sure we have all of that data organized and really clean.
Yeah, give Cresset credit. Not only they have your role with AI enablement, but they also have a data governance role. Not only a function, but somebody that's really kind of a steward of that, or that's overseeing that, which is great. How do you see AI impacting advisors and in particular the advisor-client relationship?
I think so. Something we've touched on is giving advisors time back to do the human part of their job, which is interacting with clients, which is, I think, super high value and something that AI can't and shouldn't ever try to do. So if we can just drive efficiency, that ends up being great for clients. I also think it can actually help advisors deliver more tailored and personalized content. So, for example, if you know that a client is really excited about a particular topic or type of philanthropy or something, you may not have had in the past, half a day to go write a report on that topic. But AI can actually help go out and do that. Of course, you're going to vet it and go over it and make sure that the content is good, but I think we'll see advisors able to really better serve clients with that type of personalized information that they might now have time to go out and work on.
I can be really great at doing deep research, and be able to, like you said, they might not have had a day or a day and a half to be able to go deep on a particular subject that maybe your client is interested in, but you can certainly get up to speed a lot quicker on that. How can AI personalize the communication between the advisor and the client?
I think it's about yeah, providing that kind of tailored content. So whether it's a topic or something recent that's happened in the news or that might affect the client, I think AI is very good right now at summarizing. You could say, here's some papers that I have, or here's a news source that I like, or go out and look at these websites. And it can actually do the work of trying to understand, given the client context, what about this would that person care about? And it can draft content to share. And again, the advisor will have to go over that, but it will be much faster than having to have them write it from scratch. And I think that kind of personalized updates and support can be really valuable for the client.
Can you talk to me a little bit about agentic AI, how you see agentic AI impacting the advisor practice, and also what do you see in terms of, line of sight in terms of where AI is going?
So I think of generative AI in general as you essentially have some combination of a large language model, a prompt, and access to some knowledge or data or context. And that combined allows you to have some sort of action that is repeated. Agentic I know it's used in a lot of different ways, but the way I think about it is you have that structure, but it can also now go access tools, it can make decisions, it might actually take some sort of action on behalf of the person who created the agent. And I think that as we look at the advisory space going forward, essentially these agents will be able to do some of the workflows that currently have to be very manual. I really see it as we want to figure out how they can do things that are things that people are not excited about doing. It might be things related to, opening accounts or like back to data extraction or organizing forms or documents. Just trying to understand how you create it's a flexible workflow that can be repeated. That's how I think about it. I think there's a lot of ways to make it sound really hypey, but I think it's at its core, it's a flexible workflow that can be repeated, and that does need some nurturing over time to make sure it's performing well, but that will be able to support advisors.
Yeah, it's a workflow with a little bit of intelligence, right? I think it's going to be definitely, and I think it already is starting to impact low value first mile type of activities that allows to be able to free up staff to be able to work on more higher value type of activities. I think you see a lot of it, a lot of room in that area around data aggregation, back office reconciliation, as you mentioned, new account setup. There's a whole host of things that I think that can kind of really help automate and free up staff to work on a higher value type of activities. I think I did hear somebody was saying that the people that the future of management, that people are going to not only manage people, but they're going to have to be used to being managing AI agents as well as part of their job
Yeah.
description.
And I think the way to think about that is just that these workflows, because they're using generative AI, are non-deterministic. And so and the benefit that they're very flexible also means that they can flexibly, start to go in the wrong direction. So I think by managing them, it means we'll need things like evaluations, we'll need audits. There's a whole host of ways that we'll need to come out with to understand how to manage them.
Yeah, you really want the same result every time sometimes for certain functions, right? And some that's we're not always there. And I think it's important to your point that I have that human in the loop to
Yeah.
ensure that you have that auditability, that kind of quality check. Where do you see how do you see AI impacting wealth management on a larger arc? 2, 3. I mean, it's moving so quickly. It's tough to even say what's going to happen 2 years from now. But
Yeah.
taking a look at the longer arc of the wealth management industry, how do you see AI impacting it?
I think given that there's new releases every week, I don't want to pretend that I know what's going to happen in 2 years. I don't think anybody knows what's going to happen in 2 years, let alone 6 months. So I think the best thing we can do is make sure that we are kind of prepared for change and that our organization is able to quickly, come up to speed and adapt as things change and start building kind of those core competencies around how to work in this type of new interaction paradigm. So I don't want to be in the business of forecasting something so rapidly changing in 2 years, but I do think Ethan Mollick is right on this is the worst AI you will ever use. So that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, it's interesting to see where it's going to go. I mean, um, those big announcements this week with Sora. You have the AI
Mhm.
actress that came out that has kind of people up in arms a little bit. It will be interesting to see how it impacts the industry. I think ultimately, at the end of the day, I think that human connection becomes even more important. That advisor to client relationship should be enhanced, will be enhanced, but it is, that's the focus. That's the thing that AI can't replace, right? Is that human
Oh yeah.
element, that human
Yeah.
touch, right?
And I just see no world where we're interested in replacing advisors. I mean, they're fantastic at their jobs, and I think the core of the advisory relationship is that human interaction. So, can we be more personalized, more efficient? Of course, and we will work towards that, but it's all in service of helping them better serve clients.
Right. Yeah. Ultimately, it's a people business. That empathy aspect is extremely important. I think you even see the wealth management industry kind of shifting where it's becoming much more of a lifestyle coach, or there's more of a coaching aspect for clients versus just focus more on in the past was more purely technical, like, hey, here's what we're doing with investment performance and your risk and Sharpe ratios. And it allows I think the advisor really focus on what are your goals, what is the meaning of the good life, those type of broader questions that AI is not going to be able to handle. Kelly, I like to end these podcasts on a personal note with three questions that have nothing to do with wealth tech, or in this case, AI. You're in Chicago. What do you love about Chicago?
One is that I really love the lake. I feel like it looks like an ocean from the vantage
Yeah.
point of standing on the shore, which is really wonderful. And the amount of just art, culture, food that's in the city is incredible. I went to a very experimental play last week, which was just a cool thing that I could do without having to leave the city. And um, there's just a lot to explore, which is fun.
It is a great city. It is kind of unique how you have these huge skyscrapers, and then if you kind of have your back to what looks like the ocean, right? Because it's so big.
Mhm.
Um, there are some great spots there, and Second City. That's always a
Yeah,
fun
so
take,
fun.
right?
Uh-huh.
Um, what's one spot in Chicago that people might not know about from an outsider?
So there's a place that I really like. I guess it's technically Chicagoland, not in the city of Chicago, called the Morton Arboretum, which is a huge park that has tons of different kinds of trees, and they have a rotating sculpture exhibit, and they get these enormous sculptures. Right now, there's one that's maybe 2 stories tall of a giant snail in rainbow colors, which is just incredible. So if I want to get out and do a big walk or something, it's about I don't know, 30-minute drive outside the city.
Right, well, I'm gonna have to add that onto my list. Is there a book that you've been reading lately that you'd recommend to the audience?
I think given that I've mentioned Ethan Mollick, the book that I typically recommend to people interested in understanding generative AI is his book called Co-Intelligence, because I think it provides ways of thinking about the type of interaction and the types of things you can do with generative AI. I think often when we approach a new technology, you either come with some mental model of how it works, which informs how you interact with it, or you don't have a mental model and you just have no idea what to do with it. And I think he has a lot of really concrete, helpful uh, ways of thinking about the mental model of the interaction that is a really good place to start.
All right, that's a good one. I'm gonna look that one up. This has been great, Kelly. I really appreciate your time, and thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.